Who let this filthy black beggar into my wedding?
Evan Voss says it into a ballroom full of 200 guests. Old money, new money. Every suit in the room costs more than a mortgage payment. And right in the middle of all of it, standing at the entrance in a navy suit he ironed himself that morning, is a black man holding a brown paper package tied with string. The father of the bride.
Look at that suit. Look at those shoes. You came here looking like you crawled out of a donation bin and you think you belong at my wedding?
The room goes silent. 200 people. Not one of them speaks. Security takes the man by both arms and walks him out through the same doors he came in. The groom straightens his cuffs, smiles at his VIP guests, orders another champagne. He has no idea that the man he just threw out holds every permit his company needs to break ground. Every single one. 3 projects, $320 million. All sitting on that man's desk, unsigned. To understand what happens when that man comes back in, you need to understand who he is, where he came from, and what a person builds inside themselves when they have spent 26 years doing a job that nobody sees, in a room that nobody visits, signing documents that move the entire county forward, while the people those documents benefit never once think to ask who is holding the pen. There is a kind of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't drive an expensive car or wear a particular watch or arrive at events in a way that signals its own importance. It just exists, steady, unglamorous, doing the same work every morning for 26 years in the same building, in the same county, while the world outside moves in ways that depend entirely on what it does and almost never stop to notice. Calvin Barrett had that kind of power. He had never needed it to look like anything else. At 58, he woke at 5 a.m. every morning. Not because anything required it. He had long since stopped having early obligations. But because the habit had been built into him over decades, and removing it would have felt like removing something structural. He made his own coffee, strong, in the same percolator he had owned for 11 years. He ironed his own suits at the kitchen counter. He drove a 10-year-old sedan that he maintained himself and trusted completely. His apartment in Bridgeport was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, with a faucet he kept meaning to fix. A kitchen that smelled like coffee and starch on mornings when he was getting ready for something. The walls held photographs, a little girl on his shoulders, mouth open, laughing, gap-toothed. The same girl, in a cap and gown, tears running down her face, diploma in her hands. Diana, his daughter, his reason. On the morning of her wedding, Calvin stood at the ironing board in his undershirt and pressed the navy suit, 1 crease at a time. The suit was 6 years old. It was not expensive. It fit correctly. It was clean, and it was entirely his. That was all it needed to be to walk his daughter down an aisle. On the kitchen table, he had laid out Diana's gift, a pocket watch, gold scratched and heavy, that had belonged to his own father, who had carried it for 30 years as a maintenance worker at the city's water treatment plant. A man who showed up every day to a job the city could not function without, and whose name appeared on nothing official. Beside it, a handwritten letter on plain paper. No stationery, just words from a father to his daughter, written the night before in the quiet of a man trying to say everything that matters in limited space. He wrapped them in brown paper, tied the package with string. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. He tugged his collar straight. He said quietly to his own reflection, "She's not marrying the suit. She's marrying what's inside the man." On the desk by the window, half buried under a stack of files he had brought home over the weekend, sat a leather portfolio embossed in gold with the county seal of Harwick County, Connecticut. Commissioner's seal. The files underneath were permit applications, 3 of them, all active, all submitted by the same developer, all in final review. Calvin glanced at the portfolio, did not pick it up. Not today. Today, he was just a father. Calvin Barrett had been commissioner of Harwick County Planning and Zoning for 26 years. He had started as a staff reviewer in 1998, the year Diana was born. A mid-level position with modest pay, good benefits, and the kind of institutional stability that made sense for a man raising a child alone after his wife Rose died of cancer when Diana was 4. He had risen slowly, the way people rise in government when they are genuinely good at the work, rather than good at performing it, through accumulated competence, through a reputation for decisions that held up under appeal, through the trust of successive administrations that had found over time that Calvin Barrett's judgment was one of the few things in county governance they could count on to be both consistent and correct. He had been offered other things, private sector opportunities, 2 of them significant. He had turned both down without extended deliberation, because he understood something about himself that not everyone does, that he was built for this work, specifically. For the specific discipline of applying standards consistently, regardless of who was asking. For the specific satisfaction of a decision that was right, not because it was popular, but because it was grounded. Every building permit in Harwick County required his signature or the signature of someone he directly supervised. Every zoning variance, every environmental review, every construction approval from a single-family addition to a multi-hundred-million-dollar mixed-use development. 26 years, thousands of applications. Calvin reviewed them all on their merits. He always had. Which is why when Diana brought Evan Voss home 18 months ago, Calvin had recognized the name immediately. Voss Development Group, a real estate development company operating primarily in Fairfield County. Ambitious, aggressive in its acquisition strategy, currently managing 3 simultaneous major projects in Harwick County. The Riverside Mixed-Use Development, the Harbor North Residential Complex, the Downtown Commercial Tower on Caldwell Avenue. 3 applications. Combined projected construction value, $320 million. All 3 in final review at Calvin's department. All 3 requiring his signature to proceed to groundbreaking. Calvin had looked at Diana's face when she talked about Evan. He had watched Evan across the dinner table, the way Evan spoke for 45 consecutive minutes without asking anyone else a single question. The way he handled the bill, with the performative generosity of a man who needed the act of paying to be witnessed. He had decided to wait. He wanted to know who Evan Voss was when he believed nobody with any power over him was watching. He found out at his daughter's wedding. The venue was the Granville Estate in Greenwich. Stone Manor House, 100-year-old Oak Alley ballroom for $250. 6 months of planning, flowers that cost more than Calvin's car, a guest list assembled from the directory of Connecticut development money, project investors, municipal contacts, zoning attorneys, the particular stratum of people who move in circles where knowing the right names is itself a form of currency. Evan's side filled most of the room. Diana's side, smaller, quieter, further from the front. Included her mother Lorraine, her best friend Paula Ashton, and relatives from Bridgeport and New Haven who had driven in that morning. Calvin arrived by taxi. He tipped the driver $8 and walked toward the entrance with the brown paper package under his arm. Here is what Evan Voss knew about his future father-in-law on the morning of his wedding. He knew his name was Calvin. He knew he lived in Bridgeport. He knew he worked in local government, something to do with the county permits or planning or some administrative function that sounded technical and unimportant, and that Evan had never asked about in any detail because it had never seemed relevant to anything he cared about. He had met Calvin once, briefly, at a dinner 8 months earlier. He had formed his impression in approximately 2 minutes and had not updated it since quiet man, modest background, the kind of father whose daughter had clearly exceeded his circumstances. He had said something like this to his friend Colton Moore afterward, and Colton had laughed, and the subject had not come up again. Here is what Evan Voss did not know. He did not know that the county government function Calvin worked in was the Planning and Zoning Department. He did not know that Calvin had chaired that department for 26 years. He did not know that every permit application Voss Development Group had ever filed in Harwick County, the 3 currently in final review, and every application before them had crossed Calvin Barrett's desk. He did not know that the 3 applications currently pending, the ones his project teams were waiting on, the ones his investors were asking about in their quarterly calls, had been sitting in final review for 6 weeks, awaiting a signature that only one person in the county could provide. He did not know any of this because he had never asked. He had sat across a dinner table from the man who held his entire development portfolio in Harwick County and had talked about himself for 45 minutes without once asking Calvin Barrett what he did. He was about to find out. 7:14 p.m., the Granville Estate. Evan saw Calvin from across the lobby the moment he walked in. What he saw: a black man, mid-50s navy suit that had seen better days, worn shoes that had been polished but showed their age, a brown paper package under one arm. Arriving by taxi in a driveway full of Porsches and Range Rovers. What he registered wrong. Everything about this was wrong. For the room he had spent 6 months curating, he moved toward Calvin before he had fully thought through what he was going to say. That was how Evan operated. He moved first, decided the reasoning later. "Who let this filthy black beggar into my wedding?" He said it loud enough for the guests nearest the entrance to hear, loud enough for the string quartet to falter for a beat, loud enough for the room to understand that something was being managed publicly. Calvin stopped. He held the brown paper package against his chest and looked at Evan Voss with an expression that contained no anger. Not because the anger wasn't there, but because Calvin Barrett had spent 26 years in rooms where losing your composure was the one thing that cost you everything. And he had learned over that time to hold what he felt until the right moment. "I'm Diana's father," he said. Evan looked him up and down. 3 seconds. A verdict delivered without deliberation. Her father. He let out a short laugh, the kind that invites the room to laugh with it. A few people near the bar accepted the invitation. "No wonder I had to teach her which fork to use." Calvin's jaw tightened. A small motion, the only visible sign. "I came to walk my daughter down the aisle." In that, Evan's hand moved toward Calvin's lapel, not touching the gesture of contempt that stops just short of contact. "Did you pull that out of a donation bin?" "You're making a mistake." "The only mistake," Evan said, his voice rising slightly so the nearest tables could hear, "was letting Diana invite whoever she wanted. We have standards here." He looked Calvin up and down one final time. Then he turned to the room. "You are embarrassing me, in front of my guests, at my own wedding, and I will not have it." He turned to the 2 security guards at the entrance. "Get him out, both of you, now." The younger guard, 25, the expression of someone who has not yet fully learned to separate his job from his conscience, looked at Calvin's face and hesitated. "Sir, maybe we should check the guest list." "I didn't ask you to check anything," Evan snapped. "I asked you to remove him. Do it, or I'll find someone who will." The older guard stepped forward. He took Calvin by the arm, the firm, practiced grip of someone executing an order in front of an audience. His partner moved to Calvin's other side. 200 people watched a black man being walked out of a wedding by 2 security guards while the groom stood with his arms crossed and his champagne glass in his hand. Calvin did not resist. He did not raise his voice. He looked for one moment at 200 faces, some turned away, some watching with the specific blankness of people who have decided this is not their problem. He looked for Diana, who was upstairs in the bridal suite, who did not know yet. He looked at Evan one last time. "Remember this moment," he said. Not a threat, an observation, the kind of thing a man says when he knows something the other person doesn't yet. Then he walked. His shoes echoed on the marble, each step deliberate. The heavy oak doors opened. He walked through. They closed behind him. The string quartet after a moment resumed playing. Evan straightened his cuffs, smiled at the nearest VIP guest. Little mix-up at the door, nothing to worry about. He had no idea what he had just done. Paula Ashton was standing near the back of the lobby when it happened. She had been Diana's closest friend since their second year of law school, and she had told Diana 18 months ago that Evan Voss was wrong for her. Said it once clearly and then let it go, because Diana was an adult who could make her own choices. Paula watched the security guard take Calvin's arm. She watched him walk out. She looked at Evan, already smoothing the moment back into something manageable, and she took out her phone and typed 5 words to Diana. "Your dad just got removed." Outside the Granville estate, the evening light was doing something golden with the oak trees. Calvin sat on a stone bench in the garden near the allée. The brown paper package rested in his lap. He was not shaking. He was not crying. He was doing what he had learned to do in the moments that cost him most. Being still. Not the stillness of someone who has given up, but the stillness of a man who has been in difficult rooms for 26 years and knows that stillness is the only useful response to certain situations. That motion without direction is just expense. He thought about the specific quality of the silence in that lobby, the 200 faces, the string quartet starting back up, the sound of Evan's voice smoothing the moment over. He had heard that tone before, the tone of a man who has done something he considers finished, who has looked at a situation and filed it under handled and moved on. Evan Voss thought this was over. He thought about the 3 applications on his desk: the Riverside Mixed-Use Development, the Harbor North Residential Complex, the Caldwell Avenue Commercial Tower. $320 million of construction that could not move forward without his signature. 6 weeks they had been sitting in final review. 6 weeks Calvin had been watching, waiting to see who Evan Voss was before he decided what those applications deserved. Now he knew. He thought about his father, Walter Barrett, who had worked at the city's water treatment plant for 31 years, maintenance, the overnight shift for the last 12 of those years, the shift nobody wanted because it paid the same and cost more in terms of what it took from a man's sleep and his mornings with his family. Walter Barrett, whose name appeared on no official record of the city's infrastructure, despite the fact that the infrastructure could not have functioned without the work of men like him. Calvin had inherited his father's pocket watch. He had put it in the brown paper package this morning with Diana's letter, because he wanted her to have it, wanted her to carry it the way he had carried it, as a reminder of what it meant to do work that mattered, without needing the work to announce itself. He reached into his jacket's inner pocket. He took out the small photograph of Rose. To Lorraine. Diana's mother, Calvin's ex-wife, found him 3 minutes after he sat down. She was shaking. Not from cold. She had been in the back of the lobby when it happened. She had watched the guard take Calvin's arm. She had done the calculation in real time, of what intervening as a black woman in that space would cost her versus what it would accomplish. The specific, exhausting calculation that certain people are required to make in certain rooms. And she had stayed where she was, and she was not proud of it. Calvin, she sat beside him. He threw you out, in front of all those people, because of your suit. I know. Because of your skin. I know that too. So what are you going to do? Calvin looked at the estate. The ballroom windows threw light across the stone courtyard. He could hear faintly the string quartet starting back up. Evan was in there, smoothing things over, already moving on. His company has 3 applications sitting on my desk, Calvin said. The Riverside Project, the Harbor North Tower, the Caldwell Avenue build. $320 million of construction that cannot break ground without my signature. Lorraine stared at him. Calvin, he doesn't know that. He has never once asked what I do. Calvin's voice was steady, not angry, just precise. He sat across my dinner table 8 months ago and talked about himself for 45 minutes. He never asked a single question about my work. Not one. And the applications have been sitting in final review for 6 weeks. I was waiting to see who he was. Calvin looked at the estate. Now I know. Lorraine was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? She said again. I'm going to go back inside, Calvin said, and let him find out. He looked at the photograph of Rose for a long moment. 29 years old, laughing at her brother behind the camera, always laughing at something. She would have handled this better than me, Calvin said to the photograph. She always did. He put it back. Upstairs in the estate's bridal suite, Diana was sitting on the edge of the bed in her wedding dress, staring at the wall. Savannah had read her the text. Diana had not moved for 30 seconds after reading it, had sat with the phone in her hand and the words on the screen, and the full weight of what they meant settling onto her shoulders. Then she had stood up. She had gathered her cathedral train into her arms, and she had gone down the main staircase and out through the side door and across the stone courtyard, moving the way you move when you have made a decision and the only thing left is the distance between you and the person you need to reach. She saw him on the bench. She reached him and put her arms around him without saying anything for a long moment. Daddy. I know, he said. I'm so sorry. I didn't. Stop. He pulled back, looked at her face, wiped a tear with his thumb. This is your wedding day. Don't spend it apologizing for someone else's choices. He had you thrown out. He did. In front of everyone. Yes. Calvin looked at his daughter, at the dress, at the tears, at the jaw he had been watching set itself with determination since she was 6 years old. Diana, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. She looked at him. Was tonight the first time? She didn't answer immediately, which was its own answer. No, she said quietly. It was just the first time in front of you. Calvin was still for a moment. He looked at the estate, at the windows, at the light from the ballroom, at the place where Evan was almost certainly already telling someone that everything was under control. Okay, he said. Then let's go back inside. Daddy. Together. He stood, offered his arm. Let's go back inside, together. Inside the estate, Evan Voss was managing the room the way he always managed rooms, moving through the lobby with a fresh glass of champagne and the practiced confidence of a man who has decided the matter is settled. His mother, elegant and cold, appeared at his elbow to murmur approval. His father nodded from across the room. His best man, Colton Moore, materialized from the direction of the bar, with the particular energy of someone who found the whole evening more entertaining than he should have. And Paula Ashton stood near the side hallway, watching Evan work the crowd with the expression of someone who knows exactly how a story ends and is watching it arrive on schedule. At 7:51 p.m., a black town car turned onto the Granville Estates private drive. It parked at the far end of the row. The door opened. A man stepped out, tall in a dark suit that was not expensive but was well maintained, carrying a leather briefcase embossed with the Harwich County seal. He moved through the estate's entrance with the unhurried precision of someone who has been in a great many rooms and has learned to read each one accurately on arrival. His name was Gerald Preston. He was the Deputy Commissioner of Harwich County Planning and Zoning, Calvin's second in command for 12 years. The person Calvin had called from the garden bench 40 minutes earlier. He found Calvin and Diana near the side entrance of the ballroom, waiting. He handed Calvin the briefcase without preamble. Everything you asked for. Current application status on all three. The environmental review on Riverside. Calvin took the briefcase, looked at Diana. She looked at him. Something passed between them that did not require words. "Ready," he said. "Ready," she said. They walked in. The lobby went quiet the moment they came through the door. Not because of Calvin. Most of the guests didn't know him. Because of Diana, still in her wedding dress, walking back in with her father's arm in hers, and an expression on her face that the guests who knew her recognized as the specific expression of a woman who has made a decision and is done reconsidering it. Evan saw them from across the room. His first reaction was relief. She was back, they could get the ceremony back on track, he could smooth this over the way he smoothed everything over. He started toward her. Calvin stepped forward first. He walked to the center of the lobby, not hurriedly, not dramatically, just with the specific directness of a man who knows where he is going and has decided that everyone in the room should see him get there. He stopped in the open space between the entrance and the ballroom, where 200 people could see him clearly. He did not raise his voice. "My name is Calvin Barrett," he said. "I'm Diana's father, and I'd like to introduce myself properly since I didn't have the opportunity earlier." The lobby was listening. The string quartet had stopped again. "I have been the Commissioner of Harwich County Planning and Zoning for 26 years. He looked at the room, at the real estate developers, the zoning attorneys, the project investors who had come to celebrate Evan Voss's wedding. Several of them already knew exactly what that meant. He could see it in their faces. Every construction permit issued in Harwich County requires my signature or the signature of someone I directly supervise. Every zoning variance, every development approval, every project, large or small, that breaks ground in this county, it comes across my desk." He turned to Evan. "Your three projects, Evan, the Riverside development, the Harbor North Tower, the Caldwell Avenue commercial build, have been in final review at my department for 6 weeks." He opened the briefcase. He took out 3 folders and set them on the nearest table. One by one, with the calm precision of someone who has been doing paperwork for a very long time and knows exactly what each document means. $320 million of construction. He looked at Evan steadily. All 3 requiring my signature to proceed to groundbreaking. All 3 currently, he paused, not for drama, just to be precise, unsigned. The room absorbed this, the way rooms absorb things that rearrange the furniture of everyone's understanding simultaneously. One of the Whitmore partners, a real estate investor Evan had specifically curated for the guest list, turned to the man beside him and said something very quietly. The man beside him nodded, his expression, the specific expression of someone doing rapid arithmetic. Evan's face had gone a color that wasn't quite a color, somewhere between white and gray, somewhere between understanding and the inability to fully process what understanding would mean. I wasn't holding your permits because they were problems with the applications, Calvin said. 2 of the 3 are clean. The Riverside project has environmental compliance issues. The flood zone calculations are wrong, and the building density exceeds the zoning code. Your team can correct it and resubmit. He closed the briefcase. I was holding them because I wanted to know who my daughter was marrying. I wanted to see who Evan Voss was, when he believed nobody who mattered was watching. He looked at Evan for a long moment. The permits are not the point. He set the briefcase down and looked at Evan with the expression of a man who has said the professional part and is now saying the personal part, and who understands the difference completely. The point is that you looked at me tonight and made a decision in 2 seconds, before I said a word, before you asked your fiancé a single question. You saw a black man in an inexpensive suit and you decided he was nobody, and you made sure 200 people saw you do it. He tilted his head. What you didn't understand is that nobody is exactly what people like you always get wrong. The room was completely still. Evan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He tried again. Mr. Barrett, Calvin, sir, I had no idea. If I had known, I would never have. I know you wouldn't have, Calvin said. That's the problem. He stepped back. Diana was standing at the edge of the lobby. She had listened to all of it. She walked forward now, past the guests, past the flower arrangements, past the champagne tower that nobody was touching, until she was standing directly in front of Evan. She didn't yell. Her voice came out quiet, the kind of quiet that costs everything you have to maintain. I gave you every opportunity to love my family for who they are, not for what they have, not for what they know, for who they are. She looked at him for a long moment. You failed Evan. She reached down and removed the ring. She set it on the table beside Calvin's 3 folders. The diamond caught the chandelier light and held it for a moment. The wedding is off. She turned, took her father's arm. They walked out together, navy suit and ivory silk, through the same doors the security guard had walked him out 40 minutes ago. Nobody stopped them. Nobody said a word. The string quartet did not resume playing. Evan Voss stood in the center of a wedding that was no longer a wedding, surrounded by 200 people who were suddenly very interested in their shoes. And then his legs decided they were done, and he sat down on the floor of the Granville Estate ballroom without meaning to. His mother made a sound. His father turned and walked toward the exit without speaking. Colton Moore's bourbon stopped halfway to his lips. The Whitmore partners exchanged a look that said, in the language of people who move money for a living, we were never here. The formal process began before the weekend was over. Gerald Preston filed the official permit status documentation Monday morning. Standard procedure, nothing unusual about the timeline. 2 approvals, 1 return for revised documentation. The Riverside environmental compliance issues were documented in a 12-page memo that outlined exactly what needed to be corrected and what the resubmission process required. It was the most thorough memo Gerald had written all year. Calvin had reviewed it personally on Sunday evening, sitting at his kitchen table with his glasses on and his tea going cold. Not because the Riverside application required more attention than usual. It did have real problems that existed independently of anything that had happened at the Granville estate. But because Calvin Barrett had spent 26 years ensuring that every document his department produced was airtight, and he was not going to give anyone any reason to question this one. Voss Development's project attorney called Monday afternoon, The conversation was professional. The timeline for resubmission was discussed. The documentation requirements were clear. There was nothing in the call that referenced anything other than the permit applications themselves. That was how Calvin had always done business. That was how he intended to keep doing it. The Harvick Tribune story ran Thursday morning. Paula Ashton had not posted anything publicly. She was a lawyer. She understood the implications of public commentary on an ongoing situation. And she was also Diana's friend, which meant she understood that Diana's story was Diana's to tell. But she had, in the days after the wedding, spoken to 3 people she trusted. One of them was a journalist at the Tribune who had been covering the county's development beat for 9 years, and who recognized immediately what she was being told. The headline, Voss Development CEO ejected bride's father from wedding. Bride's father is county planning commissioner. It ran on page 1 of the business section. It was accurate, factual, and sourced. By Friday, it had been picked up by regional outlets. By Monday, national. The comments were what they always are when a story like this breaks, a mix of outrage and cynicism, and people sharing their own versions of the same story, from different angles, different rooms, different suits. But some of the comments were different. Some were from people in the development and real estate industry, people who understood the specific irony with a precision that general audiences couldn't quite access. And those comments had a particular quality, the dark, knowing humor of professionals watching a colleague step on the most consequential rake in the county, conducted in full view of everyone who mattered. He shook the hand of every investor in that room, one comment read, and never once asked who signed his permits. Calvin read none of it. He was at work. Inside Voss Development, the week after the wedding, was described by people who were there as the worst week in the company's recent history. Not because of the permits, those were manageable, 2 approvals and 1 correctable return with a clear resubmission path. Because of what the wedding had revealed, and because of how quickly the image of it had traveled through the specific world Evan Voss needed to operate in. The Hartford development community was not large. It ran on relationships and reputation, on the specific kind of trust that allowed a developer to raise capital and retain investors and negotiate municipal approvals across a decade-long project timeline. The image of a CEO having his future father-in-law removed from his wedding, a man who turned out to hold every permit in the county, was not an image that responded to crisis communications. It was not a messaging problem. It was a judgment problem. And in a business where judgment was the product, judgment problems were existential. 3 months after the wedding, Voss Development's lead investor on the Harbor North project called to discuss restructuring his stake. The call lasted 40 minutes. Evan's attorney described it afterward to Evan in 2 words: not good. Colton Moore's situation resolved faster. Paula Ashton had recorded the conversation at the bar she had not planned to. She had simply pressed record when something told her she should. The instinct of a person who has learned to trust her instincts, in rooms like that one. The recording was accurate and complete. She had shared it on Tuesday after the wedding with a junior associate at her firm who had connections to the Tribune. She had been very precise about what she shared and with whom, and for what purpose. Colton's managing partner called him into a meeting the following Monday. The meeting lasted 22 minutes. Colton left without his key card. He did not contest it. His attorney, after listening to the recording, advised against contesting it. The firm's statement was 3 sentences. It described his conduct as inconsistent with the firm's values. It was published on a Wednesday and forgotten by Thursday, which was the appropriate amount of attention for Colton Moore's specific contribution to the events of that evening. Paula Ashton found Diana 3 days after the wedding at the small apartment in New Haven where Diana had moved before the marriage that didn't happen. "Are you okay?" Paula said. "I'm figuring out what okay means," Diana said. "Ask me again in 6 months." "Fair." Paula sat down. What did your dad say when you talked to him? Diana was quiet for a moment. He said the permits aren't the point. He said that 3 times. I think he needed me to understand it. Do you? Yeah. She looked at the pocket watch on the table. She had opened the brown paper package that night in the estate's bridal suite alone. She had read the letter. She had stayed there for a while. Then she had changed her clothes and come downstairs. The point was that Daddy showed up, in his suit, with his package, the way he always shows up. And Evan looked at that and decided it was nothing. She picked up the watch, turned it over. He was wrong about the suit. He was wrong about the man. He was wrong about everything. Calvin Barrett went home to his apartment in Bridgeport that night. He made a cup of tea. He sat at the kitchen table, where he had ironed his suit that morning, where he had wrapped the gift, where he had written the letter in the particular quiet of a man trying to say everything that matters in a limited amount of space. The kitchen smelled like coffee, still a little like starch. The photographs on the wall, Diana on his shoulders, Diana in her cap and gown, looked back at him in the low light. He took out the small photograph of Rose, set it on the table beside his tea. She made the right call, he said. You would have been proud of her. He sat with that for a while, long enough to feel it fully, long enough to let it settle. Then he opened his briefcase and took out the Riverside Environmental Compliance Memo. He put on his reading glasses. He read it from the beginning. He always started from the beginning. The faucet in the bathroom was still dripping when he went to bed. He had been meaning to fix it for 4 months. He added it to the list for the weekend. He lay in the dark for a few minutes, thinking about Diana, about the expression on her face when she set the ring down, about the specific quality of her voice when she said, "The wedding is off," which was the voice of someone who has decided something completely and is saying it for the first time out loud and finding that it sounds exactly right. She was going to be okay. She was going to be more than okay. She was going to be the thing she had always been, sharp, principled. Her mother's laugh and her father's stubbornness and her own particular version of both. And the months ahead were going to be difficult. And then they were going to be better. He was sure of it. He fell asleep at 10:30. The permits were processed over the following weeks, exactly as Calvin had said they would be. The Harbor North Residential Complex approved. The Caldwell Avenue Commercial Tower approved. Both on standard timeline, both reviewed on their merits, both signed without delay or commentary. The Riverside mixed-use development returned for revised documentation. The environmental compliance issues were exactly what the memo described, correctable, requiring work, not fatal. Voss Development's team spent 8 weeks revising the submission. They hired a specialist environmental engineering firm. They redid the flood zone calculations from scratch. They revised the building density to comply with the zoning code. The revised application came back clean. Calvin signed it on a Tuesday afternoon and put it in the outbox on his desk. He did not note the name on the application when he signed it. He noted the documentation. That was what the signature meant. That was what it had always meant. Diana called on a Sunday morning, 3 weeks after the wedding. "Daddy." "Morning, baby. I read the letter again last night. The one from the package?" "Yeah." "The part about Grandpa's watch, about how he carried it every day for 30 years, and nobody asked him what he did, and the city couldn't have functioned without what he did." You wrote that about him, but you were writing about yourself, too." Calvin was quiet for a moment. Outside his window, a bus went by on the main street, the same route he had taken to work for the first 12 years before he could afford the car. "I was writing about a lot of people," he said. "People who do the work that holds things up without anyone noticing. Your grandfather, his father before him. A lot of people doing a lot of work that the world depends on and never stops to name. The measure of a man," Diana said. She was reading from the letter. The measure of a man is not the suit he wears. It is how he treats someone he believes can do nothing for him. You memorized it. I'm a lawyer, Daddy. I memorize things. A pause. I've been thinking about it a lot. About Evan looking at you and seeing nothing. About how wrong he was about everything, the suit, the man, what you do, what you hold. He wasn't the first, Calvin said. He won't be the last. That shouldn't be true. No, he said. It shouldn't. They were quiet for a moment together. Not an uncomfortable quiet. The quiet of two people who have said the important things and are resting in them. How are you doing? He said. Better, she said. Getting there. Good. He picked up his tea. Come to dinner Thursday. I'll be there. They talked for a while longer about nothing in particular, about everything in general, the way fathers and daughters talk when the hard part is over, and what remains is the ordinary warmth of people who know each other well and are glad to. After he hung up, Calvin sat at his kitchen table for a few more minutes. The faucet dripped in the bathroom. He stood up, got the wrench from under the sink, fixed the faucet. It took 20 minutes. He had the parts already. He always kept the parts he needed. Then he went back to his desk and picked up the next application in the stack. 38 pages. He put on his glasses and started from the beginning. Calvin Barrett drove to work the following Monday in his 10-year-old sedan. He parked in the county lot. He walked into the Harwick County Planning and Zoning Department at 8:02 a.m., said good morning to the two staff members who were already there, poured himself a cup of coffee from the break room, and sat down at his desk. On the desk, the day's applications, a stack of them, each one representing a project, a building, a development, a piece of the county's future that could not proceed without moving through this office, through this process, through the specific institutional discipline of someone who applied the same standard to every submission, regardless of who submitted it. 26 years. He put on his glasses. He opened the first file. He started reading. Nobody in the department asked him about the weekend. Not because they didn't know the Tribune story had run Thursday. They had all read it. Some of them had sent him brief texts over the weekend that said things like, "Thinking of you," and "Let us know if you need anything." But because they knew Calvin Barrett well enough to know that what he needed on Monday morning was to come to work and do his work, that was the thing that had always steadied him. The stack of files, the reading glasses, the beginning of the first page. This is what power looks like when it is real and not performed. Not the champagne and the guest list and the $10,000 suit. The desk, the files, the standard applied consistently, morning after morning, to the work that holds everything else up, quietly, without announcement, with the specific satisfaction of someone who knows exactly what their work means, even when nobody else in the room does. Evan Voss had looked at Calvin Barrett and seen a man who could do nothing for him. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. And the thing about being that wrong, the specific particular thing about it, is that it doesn't come from malice. It comes from never having asked. From 45 minutes at a dinner table talking about yourself without once wondering what the person across from you does when they go to work in the morning. From a 2-second assessment in the lobby that felt like certainty because it always had before. Calvin Barrett had spent 26 years in a room that nobody visited, doing work that everybody depended on, signing documents that built the county around him. He had never needed anyone to know. But when it mattered, when his daughter needed him to walk back through those doors, he had known exactly what he was carrying. That is the thing worth understanding, not the twist, not the permits, not Evan Voss on the floor of his own ballroom. The thing worth understanding is a man who ironed his suit at 5 a.m. and wrapped a gift in brown paper and showed up to his daughter's wedding knowing exactly who he was and who did not need 200 witnesses to confirm it. He already knew. He always had. Before you go, 2 questions. And I want honest answers, not comfortable ones. First, have you ever been Calvin on that bench? Not necessarily at a wedding. Anywhere. Any room where someone looked at you and decided in 2 seconds that you were nobody, that you didn't belong, that whatever you were holding wasn't worth examining. What did you do? Did you walk back in? Tell me in the comments. Because there is someone reading this right now who is sitting on their own bench, in their own garden, holding something nobody has thought to look at, and they need to hear from someone who walked back through the door. Second question. What is the work in your life that holds things up without anyone noticing? Not the work with the title or the visibility, the real work. The kind that if it stopped tomorrow, something important would stop functioning. Who does that work in your life? Say their name. Tell us one specific thing they do. Because here is what Calvin Barrett knew, what his father knew before him, what the pocket watch was trying to say. The building runs on the people. Everyone sees it stands because of the people nobody asks about. Like this. If you believe that the man who signs the permits deserves the same basic dignity as the man who builds the towers. Subscribe for more stories like this. Share this for the next person being told in a lobby or a ballroom or anywhere else that they don't belong somewhere they have spent decades making possible. Tell them, go back in. The folders are on your desk. I'll see you in the next story. The measure of a man is not the suit he wears. It is how he treats someone he believes can do nothing for him. You already know this. The question is whether you act like it when it costs you something.